Back in the day, when Jesus was hanging out at the Mount of Olives and spending time at the temple, folks did not have fidget spinners. Do you know what a fidget spinner is? It's a little toy, and you spin it. You spin it when you're upset or annoyed or distressed. It's supposed to be a way to relieve some of that for you. And actually, I kind of like it. I borrowed this one, but I think I might get one for myself. So what did first century Mediterranean folks do when they were feeling troubled or perturbed? Well, actually, the answer to that question is in the gospel. There was a custom at the time that if you were really feeling kind of out of it, worried about something, you would bend down to the ground and doodle on the ground. Exactly what Jesus does. There's a good chance then that we're wasting time when we try to figure out what did Jesus write when he was doodling on the ground. The message seems to be not so much what did he write, but simply that he was unhappy with the question the scribes and the Pharisees posed to him. Shall we stone this woman to death? The first response he makes here, doodling on the ground, is the last thing these religious leaders expected him to do. It's even safe to assume that the scribes and Pharisees would have been insulted when Jesus appeared to ignore their question. There's a tension here. They're trying to get him to say something. If Jesus says the woman shouldn't be stoned, then he's publicly contradicting the law of Moses. But if he says she should be stoned, then he's contradicting his own message of mercy and forgiveness. When invited into this game of whose rules are better, Jesus chooses not to play. He stoops down to the ground and doodles. Jesus recognizes that the woman here in the story has broken an important rule. She has committed adultery. But Jesus isn't in this just for the rules. He's in this for the person who is bound by the rules. I think sometimes we, especially in our own times, we get this business of Jesus and rules and people kind of jumbled up, mixed up. The way some folks talk, you might think that Jesus cared so much about loving people that he didn't care much about the rules at all. Well, it's true that the whole of Jesus' message can be summed up in the one word, love. But we can't lose sight of the fact that for Jesus, love was not some freewheeling, personally fulfilling, feel-good emotion. For Jesus, love is the law. That is to say, for Jesus, love is what binds us to God and one another. For Jesus, love is what makes us accountable to God and to one another. For Jesus, love is what holds us responsible, not so much for our own happiness or comfort, but for the common good, especially for the welfare of the poor and for the glory of God. That's not to say that people exist for the sake of the law, not even for the law of love. Rather, the law, including the law of love, exists for those who are bound by it. So why was Jesus perturbed? What distressed Jesus is the question posed by the scribes and the Pharisees, which seems to say that they're only concerned about the law. They care little, or maybe nothing at all, for this woman who's in front of them. What Jesus sees so clearly, even as he bends down to write on the ground, what Jesus sees so clearly is the person, the woman, The woman who has sinned, who has been found out, who has been embarrassed and shamed, who is accused, judged, and waiting to be sentenced. The scribes and Pharisees want only to know how to punish her and get rid of her. Jesus' only interest is to save her, to do something new in her life, to turn her life around, to rescue her from what? To rescue her from the rule-breaking foolishness of her sin. Jesus wants to save her from her failure to respect how love had bound her to her husband and to God. Jesus wants to save her from her failure to be true to promises she had made to her husband and to herself. Jesus wants to save her from her failure to be responsible for the good of others in her life. And how does he do that, Jesus? First, he dismisses those who care only about the rules, the law. Let the one without sin be the first to cast a stone. Now they become the shamed, the embarrassed. Now they are the ones caught, exposed, judged, and condemned by their own words. Then once the hypocrites have left the scene, Jesus draws the woman into the tribunal of his love, into the courtroom of his mercy. He fully recognizes her sin and chooses not to condemn her. He frees her from her sin, sends her off with but one caution: don't sin anymore. That is, stop breaking the rules. Because when you break the rules, you break the law that is love. Jesus does the same for you and me this Lent, this morning. He recognizes our sins. He knows them better than we do. But he chooses not to condemn us. He chooses to do something new in our lives, to turn our lives around to his mercy and forgiveness. Jesus is all about love, which means he expects us to play by the rules of love, to live by the law that love is. The love Jesus enjoins on us, his law of love, makes great demands on us. And meeting those demands is often at the expense of our personal comfort and our individual freedom. We have to give those things up to obey the law of love. The greatest image of this law of love is the cross of Jesus. The cross is the model for the kind of self-giving love Jesus expects us to have for one another. Not some freewheeling, personally fulfilling, feel-good emotion, but rather a love whose rule makes sometimes life and death demands on us and calls us to accountability to God, to one another, and to our own word. This is the love. This is the law that holds us responsible for the good of others and especially for the poor. That's the love we find on the cross. And it's this very same love that will be shared with us in a few moments in the Eucharist, at the Lord's table, on the altar of his sacrifice, in the supper of his mercy. May the love we receive in this sacrament be the love we offer each other. And may we, like the woman in the gospel, come to know how merciful is the Lord, who knows our sins, who chooses not to condemn us, whose law is love.